A colossus is born, the rise of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union, officially known as the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or USSR, emerged from the ashes of the Russian Empire following the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917. Led by Vladimir Lenin, the Bolsheviks promised a socialist utopia, a stark contrast to the Tsarist autocracy that had ruled Russia for centuries. The Soviet Union encompassed a vast territory, spanning 11 time zones and encompassing a diverse array of cultures and ethnicities. It became a global superpower, a beacon of communism, and a formidable rival to the capitalist West, especially the United States. Despite dark chapters of political repression, the Soviet Union played a crucial role in defeating Nazi Germany in World War II. The post-war years saw the Soviet Union emerge as a nuclear power, solidifying its position as a global superpower. The Cold War, an ideological and geopolitical struggle between the Soviet Union and the United States, dominated the latter half of the 20th century. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union faced economic stagnation, political repression, and growing unrest, leading to its collapse in 1991. Cracks in the facade, early signs of trouble. The seeds of the Soviet Union's demise were sown long before its dramatic collapse in 1991. The centralized command and control economic model, while effective in driving industrialization in the early years, proved to be increasingly inefficient and unresponsive to the needs of the people. The lack of competition and market forces led to stagnation, shortages, and a decline in the quality of goods and services. Political repression, a hallmark of the Soviet system, also played a significant role in undermining the regime's legitimacy. The Soviet people, deprived of basic freedoms and a voice in their own governance, grew increasingly disillusioned with the system. Nationalist sentiments grew stronger in the republics, exacerbating tensions and fueling the desire for independence. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union was deeply divided, its economy stagnant, and its people yearning for change. Glasnost and Perestroika. Reform and unintended consequences. In the mid-1980s, facing mounting economic and political challenges, the Soviet Union underwent dramatic reform under Mikhail Gorbachev. Gorbachev's program of Perestroika, restructuring, and glasnost, openness, aimed to revitalize the stagnant Soviet economy and increase transparency. Glasnost unleashed a torrent of criticism, exposing decades of corruption, inefficiency, and human rights abuses. Perestroika faced resistance from entrenched interests within the Soviet bureaucracy. The result was economic chaos, as the old system was dismantled without a viable alternative in place. Gorbachev's reforms, while intended to save the Soviet Union, ultimately hastened its demise. By unleashing forces he could not control, Gorbachev set in motion events that culminated in the Soviet Union's collapse. The Soviet Union's final years were marked by hope and uncertainty, grappling with the challenges of reform and its tumultuous past. Economic stagnation, the weight of inefficiency. The Soviet economy, once a model of industrial might, had been gradually deteriorating for decades. Chronic shortages of consumer goods, shoddy quality, and a lack of innovation characterized the Soviet economy. The emphasis on heavy industry and military spending came at the expense of consumer goods, leaving citizens facing long lines and limited choices. The lack of competition and market forces stifled innovation and efficiency. The Soviet economy was heavily burdened by a bloated and inefficient bureaucracy. The Chernobyl disaster of 1986 exposed the shortcomings of the Soviet system, highlighting the lack of transparency and accountability. The disaster further eroded public trust in the government and highlighted the urgent need for reform. A people-divided nationalism and the yearning for freedom. The Soviet Union, despite its official pronouncements of unity, was riven by ethnic and nationalist tensions. The Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania harbored a strong sense of national identity and a desire for independence. In the Caucasus region, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia often clashed with Soviet policies. In Central Asia, the republics chafed under Soviet rule, fueling resentment and a desire for greater autonomy. Throughout the 1980s, nationalist movements gained momentum, challenging the legitimacy of the central government. The Soviet government's heavy-handed response only served to further inflame tensions. The rise of nationalism was a clear indication that the Soviet project was failing. Gorbachev, reformer or accidental demolitionist? Mikhail Gorbachev, the last leader of the Soviet Union, remains a figure of both admiration and controversy. His supporters view him as a visionary reformer who sought to modernize and democratize the Soviet system. His detractors blame him for the Soviet Union's collapse, arguing that his reforms were ill-conceived. Gorbachev's legacy is complex and multifaceted. His decision to embark on reforms stemmed from a genuine desire to address the country's deep crisis. Gorbachev's reforms of glasnost and Perestroika unleashed forces that had long been suppressed. This newfound freedom paved the way for democracy and human rights in the former Soviet Union. In the end, Gorbachev was a tragic figure, a reformer who unleashed forces he could not control. The Cold War's crushing grip, external pressures mount. The Cold War played a significant role in the Soviet Union's demise. The costly arms race with the United States placed an enormous strain on its already struggling economy. The Soviet Union was forced to devote a disproportionate share of its resources to military spending. This diverted resources away from crucial sectors such as consumer goods and technological development. The Soviet Union's support for its satellite states in Eastern Europe also drained its resources. The Reagan administration's hardline stance further pressured the Soviet Union. These factors, combined with the Soviet Union's internal weaknesses, created a perfect storm that led to its collapse. The collapse, a world transformed. The year 1991 witnessed the dissolution of the Soviet Union, marking the end of an era. The formal dissolution took place on December 26, 1991, with the recognition of the independence of its constituent republics. This act marked the end of the Soviet Union and the emergence of 15 newly independent states. The collapse of the Soviet Union had profound implications for the world. The Cold War came to an abrupt end, removing the threat of nuclear annihilation. The United States emerged as the sole superpower, ushering in a brief period of unipolarity. The collapse also unleashed a wave of democratization and market reforms across Eastern Europe and the former Soviet republics. However, the transition from communism to democracy and capitalism was fraught with challenges. The legacy of a superpower echoes of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union, despite its dramatic collapse, continues to cast a long shadow over the world. Its legacy is complex, marked by both remarkable achievements and tragic failures. One of the most enduring legacies is the existence of Russia as a major power on the world stage. Russia's resurgence under President Vladimir Putin has raised concerns in the West. The collapse of the Soviet Union also left a legacy of instability and conflict in many parts of the former Soviet Empire. The wars in Chechnya, Georgia, and Ukraine are reminders of unresolved issues. The Soviet Union's legacy is also evident in the rise of authoritarianism in some former Soviet republics. Furthermore, socialist ideas and critiques of capitalism have gained renewed traction in recent years. Lessons from the rubble. Understanding the collapse's importance. The collapse of the Soviet Union provides lessons for understanding the dynamics of power and the importance of economic and political reform. One key lesson is the importance of economic vitality for regime survival. The Soviet Union's inability to adapt its rigid, centralized economic system proved unsustainable. Another crucial lesson is the importance of political reform and responsiveness to popular demands. The Soviet Union's rigid political system ultimately proved to be its undoing. The Soviet collapse underscores the enduring power of nationalism and the importance of addressing ethnic and national grievances. Recognizing and respecting the rights and aspirations of all citizens is crucial for maintaining stability. The world after a new global landscape emerges. The collapse of the Soviet Union fundamentally reshaped the geopolitical landscape. The United States emerged as the sole superpower, but the world did not become unipolar. Instead, a more complex and multipolar world order emerged. The post-Cold War era has been marked by both cooperation and competition. Globalization has brought significant economic growth, but also exacerbated inequalities. The world today is characterized by rapid technological change and shifting power dynamics. Understanding the lessons of the Soviet collapse is crucial for navigating the complexities of the 21st century.